I want to welcome each of you to the Leadership Institute for Ecology and the Economy Speaker Series evening, Harvest Today, Harvest Tomorrow. I want to especially thank our presenting sponsor tonight and for our entire speaker series, the Sonoma County Water Agency. Their sponsorship has enabled us to put on this event, pull together our speakers, and offer our Leadership for a Sustainable Future class the ability to attend and continue their education in addition to their coursework during the regular class. My name's Nick Caston. I'm the CEO of the Leadership Institute, and you can learn more about the speaker series and all of the programs of the Leadership Institute at our website, www.ecoleader.org. That's ecoleader.org. I already congratulated the Water Agency, so what do you know? I do want to point out that the Water Agency this year has committed to go 100% carbon-free and has succeeded in going carbon-free in 2015 for the provision of water, in large part enabled because of Sonoma Clean Power and their ability to deploy photovoltaic on the water ponds that they're actually storing for water. So it's a big deal. You can find out more about that at scwa.ca.gov. Tonight's panel is occurring in the waning days of the harvest. Some of the wineries and vineyards have already finished their harvest and a few are winding up. And we're focusing on the practices and efforts occurring right now in the county to ensure that the future viability of viticulture continues for the next generation of wineries and viticulturists and for the county's agricultural heritage. Each presenter is going to be asked to give a 10-minute presentation. Once all three speakers are done, I'm going to pose some questions from the audience as well as some prepared questions that we have here today. Our three speakers are Valerie Minton, Program Director at the Sonoma Resource Conservation District, Robert LaVine, Sustainability Manager with the Sonoma County Wine Grape Commission, and Julien, Gervreau, Sustainability Manager at Jackson Family Wines. I'm going to do a brief introduction for each of them when they come up, so I'm just going to start with Valerie. Valerie is a dedicated conservationist, volunteer leader, and lifelong resident of Sonoma County. She's a fellow of the Leadership Institute. And as Program Director for the Sonoma Resource Conservation District, Valerie leads the Land Smart Planning Program for promoting productive lands and thriving streams throughout Sonoma County. In 2014, Valerie was appointed by Governor Jerry Brown to the North Coast Water Quality Control Board, where she still serves. There you go.
Thank you. Can I stay seated? Okay. Well, yeah, it looks like Gwen will pull my slides up. It's great to be here with all of you. I work for a conservation district, and in short, what we do is work with rural and agricultural landowners on a voluntary basis to do conservation. And so my focus when it comes to sustainability is really sort of the natural resource environmental side of sustainability. And with my 10 minutes, I'm going to start by talking about some of the natural resource drivers for conservation on vineyards, some of the potential natural resource issues. Excuse me, there are all kinds of drivers, and so I've chosen to just focus on a couple of them and then give some examples of what the folks that we're working with are doing based on those natural resource issues and drivers. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is water quality. Water quality is my passion. It's what I've always worked on. And in the North Coast, we have, North Coast of California, of course, we have some of the biggest pollution issues on the North Coast of California are things that people don't even traditionally think of as pollution. One of those things is sediment. A lot of people think it's a naturally occurring thing, dirt on the ground. People don't always think of that as a pollutant, but it actually is one of the major causes of impairment of water quality in our region. And so vineyards, like any other human land use, can have issues of erosion with bare surfaces and unstable areas that happen from grading and different kinds of construction. So that's sort of one of the primary drivers of some of the traditional conservation work that happens on vineyards is controlling sediment. Another water quality factor is, it's hard to take a picture of this, so I took a picture of shade over the water, because temperature is another thing that people don't think of. We probably have a pretty well-informed room here, so you guys may already be thinking about this as another cause of pollution. Temperature is something that pollutes waterways if you don't have adequate shade over the water, and temperature is a factor that can cause a whole string of reactions in a waterway that are not good. And so again, vineyards, like many other human land uses, can have impacts on water temperature if development of the vineyard has caused there to be less than adequate shade along the waterway. So that's sort of another area of traditional conservation on vineyards. Another issue that is getting more and more exciting for all of us as we make our way through this unprecedented drought is water quantity. And you know, the whole basis for water quantity issues in this area is that we have this beautiful Mediterranean climate where in a certain season of a normal year, we have lots and lots of water, sometimes too much water. And then in another season, we have sometimes no water in the stream. Certainly this year, we have no water in a lot of streams. And that is, again, something that can be exacerbated by any human water use, vineyards included in that. And then we have these guys. These aren't they cute? These are coho salmon. They're an endangered species. So we have a couple different salmonids, actually 3 different salmonids in Sonoma County: coho salmon, Chinook salmon, and steelhead trout. And these guys end up being a huge driver for conservation and for natural resource concerns. And part of that is that they are this amazing species. They have economic value. They have a really key place in our ecosystems. And then another part of it is that when it comes to those that use water in this area, they are kind of the most sensitive. They're the ones where if something is wrong, it goes wrong with them first. And so not only are they important in their own right, but they're a really important indicator of what's going on in our watersheds and in our streams. So protecting water quality on vineyards. I love this picture. It might not be that beautiful picture, but I really love it. This was taken by one of my staff out on a vineyard in Sonoma Valley. They went out to meet with this vineyard owner, and it happened to be pouring rain. And they took this picture because they were amazed at how clear the water was running through the ditch on this vineyard. When roadside ditches are looking murky and nasty, they noticed that the water was running really clear, because one of the simplest things that grape growers have been doing for generations is just keeping cover on the ground during winter. And so that's sort of one of the old-fashioned practices. There are fancy versions of it. You can plant all kinds of fancy things. You can plant them in fancy ways. But the bottom line is this is a really important conservation practice that vineyards have been doing actually a better job of than a lot of other land uses for a long time, is keeping good cover on the ground. And so that nice clean water running in a rainstorm is a result of that. Then we get into some bigger things. This is one of the biggest sources of sediment that a lot of people don't think of. And again, this is one that happens on vineyards, but happens in a lot of other rural settings too, is unpaved roads. Unpaved roads are, dirt roads. You get water hitting the road, and the way that they used to design roads kept the water running down the road for a long time. A lot of the time, the road sort of became part of the stream system, which is really not good for transportation because it leads to a lot of problems with road maintenance. It's also not good for water quality because what ends up happening is that water builds up speed, builds up power, picks up all the dirt that you actually want to stay on the road and puts it in the waterway. And so one of the, not necessarily high-tech, but very expensive things that a lot of vineyards that we're working with are looking at is going back in and altering their road systems so that the road systems are no longer part of the stream system. They are something that is getting the water off the road into areas where the water can infiltrate into the ground so it can be part of groundwater recharge rather than being part of that big peak flow event where the stream already has too much water in it. And so this is a huge undertaking and something that sort of, we call it the bread and butter of a resource conservation district. It's something that we've been doing for years, and we're kind of the specialists in it, and more vineyards are working with us to do these sort of large-scale projects to replace culverts and reshape the roadways and basically keep sediment out of the streams. When it comes to improving stream flows, there's also a whole variety of things from low tech to high tech, from costly to not costly. One is frost protection, which was an issue that was really big in the news quite a while ago. It's not as big in the news now, but it's still an issue. It can be a huge demand for water because counterintuitively, spraying water on grapes during frost actually keeps them from freezing and being damaged. And so what a lot of vineyards have done over the last several years is switch to alternative methods like wind machines that use air instead of water to control frost in their vineyards. Another thing that more and more, and this is another very traditional practice actually, off-stream storage of water, but people are getting a lot more excited about it again. This idea that in a Mediterranean climate, we have so much, in a normal year, we have so much water during the wet season and so little water during the dry season when it's actually needed for things like irrigation. And so a lot of vineyards getting more and more creative about where they can put ponds to do off-stream storage so that they can harness that water that is available in winter and store it for summer for use in irrigation. And then another thing that I think you'll hear more about later, so I'll just touch on it quickly, is the newest realm of improving stream flows is that some of those people who have those ponds actually have extra water that they're not going to use for irrigation. And I've had farmers for years asking me when we talked about fish and stream flow, can I put some of the water from my pond in the creek? And I've had to say, well, no, the permitting agencies probably won't let you do that. There are all these concerns about how, whether the water's clean enough, and so they're like, okay, well, you're going to keep talking about the fish and flows. And so this year, it's finally happening because things got so bad that everybody got together and figured it out. And so there are, in a couple of key locations, you have to have the right circumstances, but there are people actually releasing water from their ponds into the stream, putting water back in the stream at the time when fish need it most, and other organisms too, and people. I mean, there are all kinds of, beyond fish, there are all kinds of different users that need water in these streams. And then the other element that is getting more and more popular, I would say, is enhancing fish habitat. And so this picture, what's interesting about fish habitat projects is that if you do them really well and you look at a picture of it, you can't tell that you did anything because it just looks like a beautiful stream. So is there a pointer on this? So these rocks on here actually were placed in some natural systems, it would just look like this, but these rocks were placed here so that water would plunge over them and create a pool, a nice deep pool where fish could hang out. And then this wood was put along the sides to create shelter in that pool. So if there's fish hanging out there in the summer and a raccoon or some other predator comes by, they have a place to hide in the shade where it's safe. And so this is something that is getting more and more popular among grape growers. I think both out of stewardship ethic, and if you have a tasting room on the property, it's a really cool thing to be able to take people from the tasting room out and look at the fish habitat. So that's been something that's been, I would say, over just the last decade, seems to be really picking up steam with the combination of, unfortunately, more dire circumstances for endangered fish, and also grape growers and other landowners getting more and more excited about the idea of fisheries enhancement. The last thing that sort of ties it all together for us is comprehensive planning on a property. And we have a whole slew of grape growers. We're focused right now down in Sonoma Valley, working with us to do comprehensive planning. Nick mentioned the LandSmart program that I manage. And going out on their properties and looking around at everything comprehensively and talking about what's working well and what's not working well, and then coming up with a plan for what are the highest priority things that we could do to make conditions better for water quality, for water quantity, for fisheries, other natural resources, and then setting up a plan for how those things are going to happen. And so that's been a really exciting and rewarding process, because on agricultural lands, the bottom line is conservation it's not straight preservation. It's not just leave the land as it is and don't do anything with it. It's about the agricultural producer and the land giving to each other. And so this process of planning is really exciting, because it's a way that you can look at how can you keep that land as productive as possible and also keep your natural resources thriving. And I'll just close with, I thought of this after I made my slides, so I didn't put it in, but my favorite conservation quote is from Aldo Leopold, and really sums up sort of that drive for natural resource conservation, and that is that when the land does well for its owner, and the owner does well by his land, and both are made better by reason of their partnership, then you have conservation.
Excellent. Thank you, Valerie. I think it's interesting to remember that there were people kayaking through Healdsburg less than 12 months ago. And that's the type of climate that we're in a very serious 4-year drought where we still had that big flow. So it's good to remember the Mediterranean climate. Our next speaker is Robert LaVine. He is a viticulturist with 30 years experience in California wine growing. Robert currently serves as the Sustainability Manager for the Sonoma County Wine Grape Commission. Prior to this, he worked at Fetzer and Mondavi. While at Mondavi, Robert was a founding member of the Central Coast Vineyard Team, which played an early leadership role in bringing sustainable practices to vineyards along the Central Coast. So, Robert?
I'm going to try and see if I can work this out so I don't have too many hands going. We'll see what happens here. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for fellows for coming to see this with me. Which one? This one? That one. Yay. Okay, so I work for an organization called the Sonoma County Wine Grape Commission, and our mission is to let me read that to you because it's important. So it's to nurture and protect the agricultural resources of the county while increasing the value of Sonoma County wine grapes. Most of our members are multi-generational farming families and who want to pass on their vineyards to their kids and grandkids and future generations. So these are the major initiatives of the commission. We're focused on 3 or 4 major things. One, of course, is promoting the wine grapes and vineyards of Sonoma County and elevating the Sonoma County brand amongst our wineries and amongst our visitors here. We also help market the grapes to the wineries that buy them, hoping to increase the value of them. We also offer a wide range of grower education to growers on every topic you can imagine a grower might want to be educated on, from viticultural education, business strategy, and industry trends. And lastly, we're here to engage with the community so we have a useful dialogue, an open dialogue, an honest and complete dialogue about the things that concern them that the viticulturists are doing in the county. How do we define sustainability at the commission? We talk about the triple bottom line, which I'm sure this room all knows about, people, planet, and profit. When we say economic viability, we're talking about fair profits for our vineyards so that they can last into the future. Environmentally sound means that we're taking care of the resources like water and soil that are protected in the natural areas, and the flora and the fauna there are preserved and enhanced. And social equity means that we want to provide good jobs and positive workplaces and be mindful of our neighbors' well-being and contribute to building strong communities. So we did a really crazy thing last year. We told the world that in 5 years, we were going to have all of our growers in this county, 100% of our growers, be certified sustainable. It was bold beyond belief, even to us. And so it's an exciting time for us as we move towards that. We're now in year 4, and we're making great progress. So why did we focus on sustainability? What was the point? Well, we knew sustainability is the right thing to do. That's the easy thing, right? That's always the top line. It's good for our region, for our people, for the community. But we also know that it plays well to who we are. It's true to who we are. Our families have been here a long time. They love the land like no one else in this county loves the land. They've been part of us for so long. They have a deep respect for it. So it really does play to our core values as growers. There's also opportunities for, some opportunities there's marketplace opportunity. And I put opportunity in quotes there because maybe it's beyond opportunity, it's a necessity now. We know that the Costco's of the world, and the Walmarts of the world, and the people who buy our wines are demanding a higher consciousness around what we do and how we do it. And so we need to deliver on that at the same time we deliver great tasting wines. So it has become part of our what we sell and how we add value to our products. There may be some opportunities to offset some regulatory burdens for growers, and growers are always interested in that because those are things that take them away from their core mission. And finally, we want to do it because we want to build trust in the community. We want people to understand that we're open to talking about the preservation of the land, and we want to make sure that dialogue goes on and is all open and honest and transparent. So, as we approach sustainability, here's the reality of it. It's a dog's dish of things we can think about. It really is too complex for a grower to sit down and say, darn it, today I'm going to start being sustainable. Gosh, I wonder what I should do next. I mean, that's really where we were back in the 90s. So we've worked to untangle that, and we've had some really, really great help. And that help came from there's a picture missing there, that's weird. It came from an alliance between two major groups in the industry. COG is the largest grower group in the state, and Wine Institute is the largest winery organization in the state. They came together and created an alliance to there's a whole bunch of stuff missing off that slide. That's great. They came together to, no, don't worry about it. No, I'll get there. They came together to create, actually, that was good. They came together to create this. This is what the picture was of. It's 400 pages. It's 3.5 pounds. Luckily for me, it's also available online. But this is called the California Code of Sustainable Wine Growing Workbook. And it's what I work with in helping growers assess their vineyards. It's a systematic and comprehensive and easily accessible online assessment of growers' sustainable practices that provides growers or vendors a clear picture of where they stand on a whole host of sustainable issues. It's the... Oh.
He clearly has someone who develops this.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's how it works. That's what the buttons are for. So there's in the book there's 13 chapters in there. They cover and within those 13 chapters there's 138 criteria. Those are really questions. We call them criteria. And those are the list of chapters. So soil management, water management, ecosystem management, neighbors and community, human resources. The effort was to get everything in here. To think of every issue, a sustainable issue a grower might face across all 3 pillars, and ask them a question about how they deal with it. It provides a clear and concise roadmap to sustainability. So step 1 of the process that I go through with growers is self-assessment. And what that means is I get them to answer the 138 questions in the book. The book first off, the process is voluntary. We go out and talk growers into doing this. It's free to growers. We provide them the tools to do it with. We give them a book. It takes 3 or 4 hours of their time, so it's not a huge time commitment, but it takes a morning for them to get through it. It's relatively uncomplicated. They just have to read the questions and pick the best answer. It's done online, so not only does it make it easy for them to input answers, but we're able to aggregate answers back out and see how we're doing as a county on each of the 138 topics. So it allows us to improve our education. And at the end, it provides the grower with some useful information. One, they learn a lot through the process, but they also are able to compare their scores to county and regional or state averages to see how they're doing relative to their neighbors. So this is what the criteria look like in the book. And you can see there's 4 categories for each one. They're not called a question because really you're picking which category your practices are most likely to be. So this one, this is on monitoring for insects and pests. Category 1 is the vineyard was never or rarely monitored for insects and mite pests. Obviously, that would be the bare minimum. Category 4 is the vineyard was monitored at least weekly for insects and mite pests. A written and electronic record of the results were kept. That's so from year to year you can learn. And then this information was analyzed and used for management decision. That's best case, high-level IPM stuff. So how are we getting the assessments done? I'm going door to door, basically, sitting down with growers wherever they're comfortable. If it's in their kitchen, if it's in their farm shop, if it's in my office, wherever I can find them. I'm also working with the AVAs and using their conference rooms and inviting local growers there to come into the conference room, and I'll do 3 or 4 people at a time. I'm also working with the wineries, like Julien's people at Kendall Jackson, where they invite their growers in, and we go through the process together. So in 3 or 4 hours at those events, I can get 3 or 4 people through the assessment. We're also working with management companies who can assess all the vineyards. So there might be a management company who manages 30 or 40 or 50 vineyards, and we can do all of his at once. It's a very long process for them to go through it, but they can do them all at once. So step 2 is getting certified. So step 1 is assessing. Step 2 is certified. Certified is a much higher hurdle to get over. It's still voluntary, but it's no longer free. Growers have to pay a registration fee, and they have to pay the auditor to come out and look at their documentation and their sites. It takes 8 hours or more. For a big assessment with many vineyards, it can take 2 or 3 days. It is more complicated, not crazy complicated, but you've got to print out stuff and have documents ready, and you've got to be prepared for an audit. And it's done by a third-party auditor. So I'm not there, the grower's there along with the auditor, and they have to prove to that auditor they did what they said they did when they took the assessment, and that they can show them proof that they know what they're talking about. So the auditor comes out to make sure that what they've said is true and sufficient by a third party. The other thing I want to say is the auditor, there's 50 of the criteria in the book have a prerequisite level, a level you have to be at or you're not going to get certified. So the auditor's there, one of the things the auditor's there to check is to make sure that on those 50, you've reached a certain level that you're at or above that level. So this is our primary certifier. It's the same people who did the book. They did the book without a thought of being a certification organization, but once they did it for a few years, many wineries and growers were asking for certification, so they turned around and created a different body that would do certification. We also accept certification from Lodi Rules, which is a group obviously over in Lodi with a similar program, and with SIP, which is a Central Coast program, much like this. So these are the certification details. So again, the third-party auditor is there to confirm that the grower has adopted the right practices. He meets those 50 vineyard criteria, that he creates action plans, which are plans for improvements on his vineyard, and that he demonstrates continuous improvement every year. It's one of the most important parts of this certification is that it's relatively easy to get certified the first time, but to stay certified year after year, every year you have to show that auditor how you've improved the vineyard in terms of sustainability. Every year you have to deliver to that auditor 3 to 5 action plans for the next year, and when they come back, they're going to check you against those and make sure you made some progress. So it's the way we get things to move forward. So this is just a. I wonder if I'm getting tricked again. Oh yeah, there you go. So I did steal these slides from someone else. Julien's on to me. So we start with self-assessment, and then the grower interprets the performance to see how they've done. Then action plans are developed, and then change is implemented. So that's how continuous improvement works, and it loops every year. So every year a grower needs to do something better, and it can be the grower gets to pick how he makes improvements. So maybe it's I want to tune up my employee worker manual this year, my employee handbook, or I want to create a safer entrance into my vineyard so that workers coming in and out can do so safely, or I want to improve a culvert so the water I deliver to the stream is getting there cleaner. There's literally thousands of things a grower can do to improve, but he's got to have something done each year. So how do we relate to organic and biodynamic? It's a question we get a lot, and it's a fair question. We see sustainability as more of an umbrella over those systems. The way I talk to people is sustainability is broad, and those other systems are deep. And so around organic, there's a very deep attention paid to, obviously, the use of pesticides. Whereas in sustainability, but there's less attention paid to the other pillars of sustainability. Whereas in sustainability, we really focus on all three pillars. So it's just a different way to attack the problem. And that's it.
Alrighty, thank you, Robert. And I should say that Robert is a member of the current leadership for a Sustainable Future class and will be becoming a fellow if he completes the program next year. Next up is Julien Gervreau. Julien is a Sonoma County native who has been involved in all aspects of the wine industry, from production and operations to marketing and sales. As sustainability manager at Jackson Family Wines, Julien sets strategies for water and energy efficiency, on-site renewable energy generation, greenhouse gas emission reductions, and waste diversion. To do this, Julien deploys integrated systems thinking, financial analysis, and a documented sustainability framework to guide the triple bottom line business strategy. So thank you, Julien, for being here. I'd like to pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Nick. I'm going to cover all of that in this 10-minute presentation as well. So before I jump in to my presentation, and what I'm going to kind of do with my 10 minutes is really reinforce a lot of the messages that you just heard and kind of share with you how a winery like Jackson Family Wines kind of approaches sustainability and what it means to us. But before I jump in, I'm going to start with a very scientific slide on the future of the world and why I'm convinced that that climate change is real. So all you need to do is follow trends in women's undergarments to understand that the Earth's climate is changing and things are definitely getting warmer. On to more serious issues. Jackson Family Wines is a family-owned wine company. We were founded in the early 1980s by Jess Jackson, and Kendall Jackson was our first brand. We've since grown to include about 40 different brands that range from Kendall Jackson to La Crema, all the way up to wines that score 100 points frequently from critics like Robert Parker, so wineries like Verite, excuse me, Cardinal. So it's a really broad swath, but Jackson Family Wines as a company is still very much family owned and operated. The young lady here would normally be in this position. That's Katie Jackson. She's Jess and Barbara's oldest daughter, and she actually had a baby a couple weeks ago, so she's continuing the lineage, and I get to present to all of you tonight. So the way we define sustainability as a family-owned company is really along that triple bottom line, focusing on the health of our lands, the quality of our wines, and the well-being of our people and communities to cultivate a thriving future for generations to come. And the way we've broken that out is along kind of our three pillars, which are sustaining the land, crafting our wines, and advancing the field. And so what I'm going to do with my time is kind of talk mostly about water issues, because as Valerie mentioned, it's a pretty big issue right now, and then a little bit about some innovative projects that we have going on, and then we can open it up to questions. But first and foremost, I just wanted to kind of cover a few of the the third-party endorsements and recommendations that we've received over the few years that we've had an established sustainability program. And as Robert was talking about, the importance of having a third-party verified and third-party audited program, I think, cannot be understated, especially in the day and age now where you're hearing so many claims about greenwashing. It's really important to have third-party recognition of your initiatives. In 2011, we were the first wine company to receive a Green Power Leadership Award, which is a program through the Environmental Protection Agency that focuses on renewable energy procurement. In 2013, we were named as a Green Company of the Year by the Drinks Business, which is a large beverage industry trade publication based out of Europe. And it's always nice to get recognition for your sustainability initiatives from folks in Europe because they're so far ahead of the curve. Minus Volkswagen. I'll leave that there. Such a disappointment. And most recently this year by the Environmental Leader, which is kind of a sustainability watchdog publication for a water recycling program that we have with barrel wash water recycling. And so, with regard to kind of our large-scale sustainability programs and this lovely book, we've been certifying since 2010. We certify all of our estate vineyards and wineries through not just the CCSW program, but also the SIP program that Robert mentioned. And for our properties up in Oregon, we certify through a program up there called LIVE. It's kind of a sister program as well. And for us, it's really that focus on the triple bottom line, looking not just at the environmental piece, but also at how we're treating our employees and how we're interacting with our communities. So all of our vineyards, all of our wineries are certified through these programs. And we're also paying a price premium for certified sustainable fruit. So last year, we announced that we would pay this price premium. And it's not a large sum. We pay $20 a ton, which in looking at it is essentially designed to help cover the cost of certification that Robert was mentioning. And from our perspective, it's a way to encourage our grower partners, most of whom are small family growers. And we work with grower partners in Sonoma County, in Mendocino, in Napa, in Lake County, as well as Monterey and Santa Barbara counties. Those are the 6 counties in California that we operate in. And it was a way for us to kind of help encourage our grower partners to get certified. We started, Katie was actually at the event when Carissa stood up on stage in January of 2014 and said, we're going to go for this audacious 100% sustainable goal. And since then, we've been spending a lot of time with Robert getting our growers through that self-assessment program. As of this kind of earlier this week, this year, we've actually achieved about 50% of all of our grower fruit is certified for the 2015 harvest. I set an internal goal for our company for 5 years down the road to be 75%, and we hit 50% in year 1. So I think it really speaks to, first of all, the efforts of groups like the Wine Grape Commission, and also the fact that, again, most of the growers that we work with are small family farmers who live on their properties. And as we were sitting down and going through these self-assessment workbooks with our growers, most of them were 80% there, and it was really about documenting their practices and setting action plans and continual process improvements in place. So it's been a really, really exciting initiative to watch unfold and to see from a grower's perspective. We were pretty guarded in our optimism for how many growers would sign up for the program because we weren't offering a huge amount of money. But most of them kind of said, if this is important to you, we'll make it important to us. And as they've kind of sat down, and Robert's a very persuasive individual, and it's been great to see the program really take off. More in Valerie's world, this is a very long 1.5-inch PVC pipe that feeds from one of our reservoirs out in Green Valley, Appalachian, into Green Valley Creek. This stretches over a mile down a hill from a reservoir, and we just started releasing water into that creek to save coho salmon in August. So over the course of the next few months, we're going to be releasing about 7 acre-feet, which is, I don't have the math in front of me, but it's millions of gallons of water back into the creek to help the oversummering. So as a land-based company and a family-owned company, it was a very easy decision to make for us to do the right thing in that regard. On the vineyard side, we've spent a lot of resources and a lot of efforts in kind of increasing our vineyard irrigation efficiency. So just kind of a quick little bit of a primer. Traditional vineyard irrigation up through the 1980s was either flood or sprinkler irrigation. And beginning in about the late 1980s, Jess Jackson started drip irrigating all of his vineyards, and that's kind of been our norm since the 80s. And moving forward, what we've been focusing on is really finding technologies that help us get even more efficient with our usage of water resources in the vineyards. The one that I'm probably most excited about is this company called Fruition Sciences, which is a group out of France that they put collars on grapevines, and they actually measure the level of sap flow that's going through the plant, through transpiration. And they let the plant essentially tell us when it's thirsty. So rather than setting irrigation schedules and saying we're going to water for 4 hours on Tuesday and 3 hours on Thursday, we actually look at soil moisture and we let the plant kind of raise its hand and say, I need a drink. And the technology is so accurate that once the sap flow levels kind of hit that threshold, then that triggers the irrigation to turn off. And we've seen over 20% decrease in water usage across the board for all the vineyards that were using this technology, and up to 80% in some vineyards. So it's really a pretty amazing technology, and one that if you kind of start to look into the world of the intersection of technology and ag, and especially irrigation efficiency, there's a lot of really, really great innovations that are happening on that front. The interesting thing about this technology is we actually approached it first and foremost from a quality perspective, because if you overwater a grapevine, it's going to produce big diluted flavor berries, and it's just all water. So we wanted to look at how we could increase quality, and we found incredible decreases in water usage as well. So finding those areas of symbiosis between high quality wines, which is our first priority, and environmental and social sustainability is really kind of where we try to focus our efforts. Same applies on the wind machine front. Valerie was discussing kind of how wind machines work. We have over 100 wind machines across all the regions where it's prudent to have wind machines, and it's something that we continue to invest in, because water usage during various different times of the year is obviously a critical factor, and in the spring, during the frost season and the bud break season, that's really when we need to be most careful with our water usage. And then, closing the water loop is a really big area for us as well. So this is a process water treatment pond. We don't call it wastewater. If anybody in any of our wineries says wastewater, they get a very stern look from me, because water should not be wasted in any perspective. So this is a process water treatment pond at our La Crema winery, just south of the airport. And all of our water that's used in the winery gets aerated and treated and goes into this pond, and then we reuse that for vineyard irrigation. So with that estate, the goal is to really have a kind of an enclosed loop for water usage. And we also invest in a lot of different technologies to actually kind of reduce water usage and also reuse water usage. So I described the barrel wash water recycling system that won the Environmental Leader Award. This is the latest and greatest innovation that we are commercializing with a company called Blue Morph. Again, it's another technology company. A guy with a PhD in biology kind of came to us 2 years ago with something that literally looked like a lightsaber. It was like a little handheld wand, and he said, "This is UV, and it will sanitize your tanks with no water." And we kind of looked at him and we said, "Okay, can you make it for bigger tanks?" And he said, "Let's give it a shot." And so what we have here is the first commercialized unit to sanitize tanks using no water. And Traditionally, it takes about 150 gallons to sanitize a tank. This thing, we call it the bug light. You pop it in through the man door of a tank. You stand it up. You press a button. You walk away, and you come back, depending on the size of the tank, between 23 and 84 minutes later, and your tank is sanitized to a higher level than we've ever been able to sanitize before. So, looking at innovations like that is kind of one of the most favorite parts of my job. And in order to really justify that from a financial perspective, one of the things we did a couple years ago is we went out and we put a cost to every gallon of water that we use in our wineries. So most of our wineries are on well systems, so we don't pay for water like a lot of municipal water users do. But our water still costs money. We have to pump it out of the ground, so there's electric costs there. We have to move it around the winery. We have to heat it in our boilers. There's a natural gas cost there, and we have to aerate it when we're finished. So ultimately, we kind of came to the conclusion that every gallon of water that we use, every gallon of free water that we use costs us 3 cents. And I will be the first one to stand up here and tell you that is a gross undervaluation of a resource that you can't live without, but it's a baseline. And from that baseline, we can now justify saving water from a financial perspective. So I can go to our CFO and say, hey, we need to spend $50,000 on this piece of equipment because it's going to save us 1 million gallons of water a year, and therefore it's got a payback of less than a year. And he will look at me and he will say, okay, great, where do I sign? And that's the importance of really being able to make the business case for your sustainability initiatives. And from our perspective, you look at water and you look at energy. Those are kind of the two big areas that do cost money. And so you can justify saving water, you can justify saving energy if you assign a value to those resources. Which is a segue into this slide, which is my other favorite slide. We're in the process of building about 6.5 megawatts of on-site solar renewable systems at 8 of our wineries across California. They're almost complete. They'll be fully interconnected hopefully by the end of this year, and when that happens, we'll be the largest solar generator in the wine industry. And what that means is we're going to be essentially producing enough on-site solar energy to offset the annual usage of about 1,300 homes. We have about 1,500 employees, so it's kind of a cool number. We're trying to get to that number so we can generally it's just a neat little number. And it'll offset from our kind of annual usage perspective about 35% of our annual company-wide annual usage, and that includes all the electricity usage in our vineyards as well. So again, looking at what electricity costs, every kilowatt hour of electricity that we use costs us 16 cents. And that is an actual real hard cost that we get a bill for. These systems, we're spending over $10 million on all of this renewable energy. These systems are going to pay for themselves in 6 years. So, year 6, day 1, we get free electricity for the next 30 or however long these things are producing. The other side of the energy bill is the demand side. And you don't just pay for your electricity, you also pay for the time of the period of the day or the period in the month when you use the most electricity and your demand spikes up. So one of the interesting things that's happening in the energy world is we've got renewables and we're able to generate electricity, but we haven't done a great job as a society of storing it. And so that's when companies like this little company, Tesla, comes into play, where they're doing incredible work in figuring out how to actually store energy. So we were one of the first companies that they approached to start piloting basically big-ass car batteries in the winery setting. So each of these boxes has the equivalent of 2 Teslas in them from a storage perspective. The batteries are kind of lined up in the back here. These are inverters and control panels, and the batteries are lined up in the back. We have over 4 megawatts of these. We have 21 of them on site at 6 different wineries. And what we're doing with them is we're using them to kind of shave off those electricity peaks. So we charge the batteries currently at night when electricity is cheap and the grid is stable. And then the batteries sit and they wait. And as our electricity usage in the winery starts to ramp up, the batteries kick on and they shave out those peaks. And and that's good for the grid, and that's good for electricity usage costs as well. What's really interesting about these is we're in the position where we can start, because they're pilot batteries and they didn't cost us anything, we can start experimenting with how to use them in an even more sustainable manner. So the manner that I just described to you is the most cost-effective way to use this battery, because electricity costs more during the day. But if you want to think about kind of being, energy neutral or even energy positive, figuring out how to tie these things into our solar system so that we can generate electricity during the day, any excess electricity that we generate from our solar panels, instead of going back to the PG&E grid, which is essentially a big battery, actually gets stored on site. And then we can use these batteries at night to charge our wineries. So there's a lot of really interesting disruptive technologies that are happening around the energy space and around the water space. And as a family-owned wine company, kind of with a 500-year vision for the family being in business, it's just really, we're in a great position to be able to continue making high-quality wines in the most sustainable way possible. So I started with a joke. I'm going to end with my other favorite slide about climate change and the importance of why we're all doing it, why it doesn't really matter. So thank you.
All righty, thank you, Julien. So I got a number of really good questions here, and we're going to try to get as many of them as possible, but I'm sure our speakers will also stick around afterwards if I don't get to your specific question, and be available to answer any questions or delve deeper into them. To start off with, I'm going to address this one to both Valerie and Robert. What's the incentive for a winery to participate in your voluntary programs? So both of you run voluntary programs. Why does a winery reach out to you and participate in it? And then, Robert, if you can also expand on how are you going to get to 100%? So I'll start with Valerie, though.
Okay, well, there are a whole variety of incentives, I would say, so I'll name a few that I can think of. One of those is actually for the programs that we do, the wine growers' pledge for sustainability actually is also a driver for people to participate in our programs, because that hefty binder there has a number of, you call them criteria, not questions, a number of criteria related to the things that I talked about. And somebody might be committed to taking part in the sustainability program, going through those criteria, and realize that there are certain areas where they're falling short and they really don't know what to do about it. And our programs are the kinds of programs that can really help them delve deep into those things and figure out the details of where they might be falling short and what they can do about it. And so that has become one driver. We've been doing voluntary conservation work for 70 years in this county, but more recently that has become a newer driver. Another driver is that a lot of the time conservation is good for the environment, but it's also good for the operations of the property. And so things like erosion, really bad for waterways and fish, also can be really bad for the property owner because they're actually losing their land. And so that's the kind of thing that's a really basic, and I think that's what's been driving people to do it with us for 70 years, is those really basic concerns about how do I keep my land working for me in the long term. And I think ag producers knew about sustainability long before the rest of us were thinking about it, because they are relying on that land and they could see changes if they did something that wasn't, so they might not have called it sustainability, but it was this matter of I need to take care of my land in this way, otherwise down the road I'm not going to be able to keep producing what I need to produce to make a living. And then I'll stop there because you probably have more that overlap with mine.
We'll see. Great question, and it is something we talk about a lot. We want to think about what the barriers are to growers getting engaged in this, but really it's not just a grower issue. It's really a question for all of us in society and culture. It's the thing about sustainability. What incentivizes all of us? what stops us, what gets us out of the shower 3 minutes sooner than we used to? I mean, we could stand there, no one's watching, who's going to know? And it feels so good, right? So it's really, at the heart of this is really a personal decision by our growers to go forward with this, and that's really ultimately what it will take. But we're helping them come to the right place by doing a number of different things. One of the things we've done is taken a part of the budget, of the money we collect from growers and dues, and we're giving it back to the growers as vouchers. So those growers who are small, this is an issue for small acreage farms. Big acreage farms take the cost of registration and auditing and spread it across a lot of acres. And by acre is how a grower assesses his farming costs. And so if you're a small guy with 10 acres, your cost, that $1,000 or more, is very high on a per acre basis. But if you've got 100 or 200 acres, it's very small. So we go to those small growers and we offer them a $400 voucher that offsets some of their auditing costs. We've also done a cool thing this year because we're a co-sponsor of the 50th Super Bowl. One of the things we're doing this year is we're giving away 2 tickets to all those growers who have assessed or certified their vineyards in the past year. So it's amazing how even though it's a raffle and there's only 2 tickets and there's hundreds of growers, everyone believes they're going to win those tickets, and so they're stepping up. We're also giving growers signs and other tchotchkes to help them, to reward them and let them tell the world what they've done. So those sorts of things work good. We also publicize their name so that their neighbors can see what they've done, other growers can see what they've done, and the community can see what they've done. So we're creating lots of feedback loops to keep them motivated. And again, I think the thing that for many growers, because remember this, no one made the growers who are the commission decide this, is they said this is the right thing for us to do, and that's the motivation that's the most important.
Alrighty, for this next question, I'm going to give it to Julien, and it's specifically dealing with the ability of continuing to grow grapes as the climate changes. So if the climate continues to warm with droughts and severe weather change, is it possible Sonoma County will no longer have the ideal climate conditions for growing grapes? What are the predictors around this?
I'm going to say yes, it is possible. Yeah, I'm probably not the right person to answer that particular question. But I think from an adaptation perspective, we need to be doing. First of all, we need to be doing everything we can to slow the tide of climate change, and then we need to be doing everything we can do to adapt as well. What I've seen in the last few years, and this past year was a perfect example. I mean, we basically got 3 rain events this year, and our society's kind of water infrastructure is designed to get as much water out to the ocean as quickly as possible, and that's not good for anybody. It's definitely not good for the fish that are kind of living in what Don McInhill, the executive director of Russian River Keeper, described to me as a bowling alley during those big rain events when big trees and everything else is coming down. Valerie mentioned off-stream storage, and we in the 90s we started kind of created an internal policy where we did not develop vineyards that unless they had a permit for a storage reservoir. So we capture vineyard runoff into reservoirs during rain events so that we can store it. And this year, when we started the irrigation season, all of our reservoirs were at about 75% during a year when a lot of people had major issues getting water. So, I mean, I think we need to do everything that we can on the renewable side. And then we need to do everything we can to adapt to a rapidly changing climate as well. Am I looking at land in Idaho to grow grapes? Not yet. Is there a day that may happen? I'm sure. It's a long game. So I hope that answers the question.
So let me add a little bit more to that. Just my thoughts is that The wonder of the grapevine is it's highly adaptable. We grow it in the coolest parts of the state, where really grapes can't get ripe because it's too cool. And we also grow it in the very warmest parts of the states. There's lots of grapes around Bakersfield. So worst case scenario, Sonoma becomes like Bakersfield. There'll probably still be grapes here. But I think something important to remember about agriculture and the efforts of agriculturalists here is right now we're about grapes and making great wine. If the climate changed for producing the highest quality wines here, we would find something else to grow because we're an agricultural community, and that's the thing we want to preserve that's most important to us. It's a shame what's happening to our climate, and we need to do all we can to stop that, but we're still going to be here, and we're going to have to feed ourselves, and we're going to have jobs, and so agriculture will continue through whatever the worst that brings to us.
Thank you. A little bit of a lighter note. What personal importance do you each attach to sustainability?
Pass.
I'll go later.
For me, it's the preservation of this beautiful place. I mean, nothing matters more to me than the way we use the land, and that it remains this, and we're able to maintain this wonderful lifestyle we have here. So I guess that's what brings me to it. I grew up in a place called Modesto, where I watched them building homes before they even built streets. They paved over literally thousands of acres of wonderful farming ground to build more and more and more homes. I wouldn't want that to ever happen to our county. So that's what brings me to this conversation. And it has since I was a teenager.
I have a 2-year-old son and another one on the way, and I think I want them to inherit and get to grow up in a place as beautiful as the place that I remember growing up. So I think it's we're all in this boat together, and it's work that we all need to make a priority. So.
I guess I think the greatest benefit for the most people, and the most people being not just those that are here now, but those that are in the future. And so, what we can do to lift everyone up around us now, and then sustain that for those that are lucky enough to come after us in Sonoma County, because certainly we live in a really amazing place. We bask in the privilege of living in such a place, and yet there are those around us in the same place who are not basking in that same privilege. And so, raising us all up and then keeping us there in a way that can be sustained for future generations.
All right, a slightly more technical question, and this is going to be on the topic of carbon sequestration and carbon farming. Tilling is obviously one of the major ways that we release carbon from the ground into the air, and if we don't till, we can keep carbon in the ground and actually pull it down through the plants. Can you just address how going no-till, or if going no-till, is a part of vineyard management that could help us stave off the effects of climate change?
I'll talk briefly about my perspective, and then I bet these guys have perspectives on it as well. From what I've seen with the growers that I've worked with, I would say at some sites, absolutely. Some sites, no-till is the best way to go, and people are doing it for all kinds of reasons that may not have started out as carbon farming, and now they're thinking of it as carbon farming too. At other sites, I think it's probably quite a bit more difficult, and so there's so much to do out there. One of the things that the RCDs, sort of the neighboring RCDs in this region, are starting to look at is setting up field trials to look at, maybe it's not even no-till, maybe it's less tillage or different tillage, or doing something, not even going whole hog, but just doing some part of it and seeing if that can keep more carbon in the soil. Because even though vineyards might all look the same to the untrained eye, there is so much variation, and so what works on one isn't going to work on every vineyard, and so we really have to have a whole suite of tools in the toolbox, and I think that more carbon can be sequestered under many different circumstances. It's just a matter of figuring out what those tools are and which ones will work best.
Yeah, there are lots of different ways we manage weeds in the vineyard. Some weeds must be controlled, like deep-rooted Bermuda grass or bindweed that can take a huge amount of water out of the vineyard. So those have to be controlled. But many weeds are really beneficial to the vineyard. They do fine there. In our Mediterranean climate, we have lots of native plants and also introduced plants, but ones that work well with our climate, that do well they grow in the spring, and then as soon as it gets hot and the topsoil dries out, they die off. They make a great bed to drive tractors on. They keep dust down. They harbor beneficial insects. Many good things come from having a cover crop across your vineyard, and so many growers have adopted that as their farming system. You do need to occasionally disc down so that you have a flat driving surface. So the growers might have a system where they disc down every other row every other year. To keep a flat driving surface and also keep out the noxious weeds. Many growers are going to undervine cultivation mechanically, and that it's controversial because it uses up and releases more carbon in the diesel you use, but it also preserves the cover crops that are down there. So cover crops are of great interest to growers right now. They're developing more and more systems. They're investigating more and more systems. There are growers out there who say, I don't want to give up my Caterpillar tractor and my disc because it's what I do for fun on the weekends, and we got to get to those guys. But many growers have said, we're not doing that anymore. So we're moving forward with cover crops.
This one's specifically back to you, Robert. I'm going to ask two questions in this because they both affect, how do you consider the ability for the county to go to 100% sustainable, both in the context of continuing to use Roundup and other types of chemicals within the vineyard, and through water use if the drought continues. Can you specifically address, do you feel these are mutually exclusive, or are we moving to a post-chemical, lower water phase as a part of your effort?
For the sustainability certifications we're using, we're not asking growers to discontinue the use of conventional chemicals. So glyphosate or Roundup is one of the things many growers will continue to use. But what we are asking them to do is take an IPM approach to every decision around the use of chemicals. So one, and it's critical, is to be in your vineyard all the time, know where your pest problems are, where the weeds are growing, so that you can attack problems when they're small and early. Two, train your field workers so that they know, because they're going to see the pest problems first, and they're going to tell you about that. So make sure they're well educated on what could go wrong out there, and they're bringing that information to you. Set economic thresholds so that you're not treating because you see some bugs or you see some weeds, but when there's truly some economic damage about to happen. And then measure diligently to those thresholds so that no treatment's done until you're truly going to have a loss. And then once you decide you may need to treat, and you have no control or no treatment as the highest priority step, the next one is, can you change a cultural practice? So if it's about weeds, can you just change the way you like cover crops that exclude other weeds and using shade from the vines to exclude weeds? Can you change a cultural practice that allows you to not have to use a chemical? And then if you do have to use a chemical, have you studied all the risk around that chemical so that you're picking those chemicals with the very lowest risk assessment? That is they kill the fewest number of things, and they last the least amount of time in the environment. And in that way, when you do apply a chemical to your vineyard or a treatment, you've done it in the softest possible way. Have you established buffer vines around your vineyard so that you're not treating around schools or around your homes, and you can set up buffer zones both in time and space so that that's done safely. Have you made sure that your spray rig is calibrated and doing right so that whatever treatment you're doing is going to the right place in the right way so it's most efficient? And then all that is done, has to be done in the safest possible manner for your workers and for your consumers. So we feel like there's a place for agricultural chemicals in the vineyard. It fits entirely with a sustainable future, and we're not going to be asking growers to stop using them. We think those can fit. I could literally talk for hours about this, and I'd like to, but it doesn't make sense. In terms of water use, we believe that growers are doing a great deal to use less and less water. It's something that they understand the cost of. The way Julien has set a cost for water, they're reducing the water use all the time. There are many really wonderful high-tech tools like sap monitors, which are really amazing space-age type stuff. But there's also growers who aren't able to make that investment, but they're also just looking at ways that they can monitor the vine by looking for visual symptoms on the vine that tell them when stress is coming, and that they can use that to reduce their water use. When I was back in my years when I was a grape buyer, having growers use less water was one of the things that I always talk to growers about, because it's a key ingredient to producing better quality grapes. And so what I would say to growers all the time is, what would happen if you didn't irrigate today? Just today. What if we just waited till tomorrow? And then when we get to tomorrow, let's ask ourselves that question again, and just watch the vine, pay attention. You'll know when it's time to irrigate. The other thing I used to say to growers is, now you always irrigate on a 7-day cycle, because it really works well with the way you've laid out the month. But what if you irrigated on an 8-day cycle? I know it's going to be complicated, because this week you're going to do it on Tuesday, and then next week you're going to do it on Wednesday, but you've reduced your water use by 12%. It's huge. So how about that? Just think about an 8-day cycle instead of a 7-day cycle, and then let's think about a 9-day cycle. So there's lots of ways that growers can do it, and all those things are being talked about and being worked on out there.
Alrighty, we are at the end of our time, so I'm going to ask each of you just to give your closing sentiments on how you think sustainability is going to advance in this industry over the next 5 years.
I mean, I think it's a time of great learning for us. That's one thing that's come out of the drought. And so, as you know, as Robert mentioned, there's all this new technology coming with reduced water use. I think that's, and you know, and the other thing that's with drought that people don't talk about is that water quality is a huge issue with drought, because when you get the big rains, you get soil washing away, you get those issues. And so I think it's a time of learning for that too. I mean, people are really thinking a lot more about how to get cover established on the ground without as much water. So there's a lot of enthusiasm right now, and there's also it seems like more money than ever being poured into technology and studies, and so I think I see sustainability in the next 5 years hopefully just skyrocketing. You know, if the rains come and we find that we're out of this drought, I pray that people will continue to remember the drought. I think that vineyards will remember it more vividly, and ag producers remember it more vividly than homeowners who get water out of their faucet and just pay a bill. So I feel very hopeful when I think about the next 5 years and beyond when it comes to sustainability on vineyards.
I agree with all that. I think we're at a very special time here in Sonoma County, where the awareness of the quality of the wines we produce here is higher than ever and going up all the time. People seek out our wines all over the world. And with that, with a successful agricultural base, sustainability follows, because when our businesses are economically preserved, then it's absolutely in everyone's there's absolute incentive to make sure that everything else here stays the same, so we can continue to achieve that. So I couldn't be prouder of the wines we produce here, and I couldn't be prouder of the growers who have chosen to make sustainability an important part of their farming system.
Yeah, and I mean, I think to bring it back to the economic side, because I agree with you. I think the drought will end at some point, but as a result of what's happening now, I think we're seeing a lot of changes in policy and in regulation around land use, water use, all of that stuff, and one of the most interesting ways of thinking about water in particular was kind of described to me by Dr. Roger Bolton, he's from UC Davis. He's going to be out at the Kendall Jackson Wine Center on the 28th, giving a kind of a talk on sustainable wineries of the future. He said to me once, he said, assigning a cost to every gallon of water you use is great. It's a great start, but have you thought about what it would cost you not to have any water, or what it would cost you if you had a mandatory 25% reduction in how much water you could use, and how that would affect your economic output? So, from my perspective, I think the biggest lesson is continue to find ways where your pursuit of sustainability and your pursuit of good business practice are aligned, because that's when you can go and you can talk to anybody in any boardroom anywhere and really make the business case for your crazy ideas. So thank you all so much for listening.
Alrighty, thank you everyone for coming again, and again thank you to the Sonoma County Water Agency for sponsoring the speaker series. Once again, you can go to EcoLeader, ecoleader.org, in order to find out more information about the speaker series and all of our education programs. And do stay and feel free to mix and mingle for a bit after right now. Thank you.